So, Dave and Vinny, Ebenezer Good. Tales from the Rampant Horse. The Rampant Horse pub sat like a stubborn relic in the middle of the Longcroft Estate, defiant against time and modernity. Its weathered sign creaked in the wind, while the regulars clung to their usual spots as tightly as the layers of nicotine on the ceiling. Friday night was in full swing, and the pub was its usual lively mix of half-poured pints, ill-advised karaoke, and relentless banter. Dave sat at the bar nursing his pint of bitter, his tie slightly askew and his jacket hanging off the stool. Behind him, his pal Vinny leaned against the bar beside him, and between them sat Scraps, Vinny's hardy terrier, his keen eyes surveying the pub for snacks. "You know, Vinny," Dave began, squinting at the dog, "I'm starting to think Scraps is smarter than you. He just sits and watches intelligently." "He has a lot in common with me, Dave. He's one of life's opportunists." Sandra, the long-suffering barmaid, sauntered past with a tray of empty glasses. She was the kind of woman who turned heads, but this was much to her annoyance. She glanced at Vinny with an exaggerated eye roll. "Opportunist, Vinny? You're lucky I don't put you on a lead and give Scraps your pint," said Sandra, exercising her famous sharp wit. "Don't threaten me with a good time," shot back Vinny. The pub erupted in laughter, with even Lecherous Lee, a regular with a reputation as greasy as his comb-over, chiming in. "I'll take the leash if you're offering, Sandra," he leered, earning a chorus of groans, and a damp bar towel was hurled at his head. Ken, the perpetually grumpy barman, stood behind the bar, polishing glasses with the same enthusiasm one reserves for dental work. "Dave," Ken muttered, "tell your mate to keep that flea bag off my bar. Health and safety will have me shut down." "He's my best friend, Ken. Don't talk about Vinny like that," Dave said, waving his hand dismissively. "If you're talking about Scraps, Ken," Vinny said, "he's cleaner than Lecherous Lee." "Oi!" Lee protested, but nobody defended him. Chapter 2. The Great Outing. The annual Rampant Horse pub outing was a sacred tradition, partly because it got everyone out of Longcroft for a day, but mostly because Ken footed the bill. This year, Ken had treated himself to a new Sat Nav. He liked to call it his Bonnie Tyler Sat Nav, because every now and then it fell apart. He got it from a bloke who frequented the pub occasionally, but he'd not been seen recently. He said it had fallen off the back of a van, which is why it was so cheap. Ken, of course, didn't look a gift horse in the mouth. As the rickety coach rolled out of the estate, Ken sat in the driver's seat, glaring at the device. The sat-nav's voice was strangely robotic and monotonous, with an accent that wavered between American and something vaguely Eastern European. "Turn right now." Ken veered sharply, sending Lecherous Lee into Sandra's lap. "Oh, hello there," Lee grinned. "Get off, Lee, before I deck you," Sandra snapped, shoving him back into his seat. After a couple more hours of swearing and veering down random country lanes, they were nearing their destination. Vinny peered out of the window. "Ken, mate, this doesn't look like the seaside." "It's a shortcut," Ken barked. The coach jolted and lurched along increasingly questionable roads until they reached an overgrown field lit by pulsing neon lights. Thumping bass shook the windows, and a crowd of fluorescent-clad ravers surrounded the coach like a swarm of moths. "What the hell is this?" Dave asked, peering out. Scraps, perched on Vinny's lap, barked excitedly. Ken slapped the Sat Nav in frustration. It said cultural event, didn't it? Cultural my arse, Sandra muttered, watching a bloke in glow-in-the-dark shorts dance past. It's a bloody rave, and by the looks of it, by the looks of this location, an illegal one at that. Well, Vinny said, cracking open a can of lager from his bag. When in Rome. Chapter 3, Rave Mayhem. The pub crew disembarked cautiously, sticking together like bewildered sheep in a rave-themed abattoir. Lecherous Lee disappeared into the crowd within seconds, muttering something about networking. More like perving. Vinny was in his element, trying to blend in by tying his hoodie around his head like a bandana. He was back in the 90s again in his head. Dave, meanwhile, tried to phone his wife. I'm not even sure how to describe this love, he shouted over the music. Imagine Blackpool on mushrooms, but worse. Scraps was having the time of his life, darting between ravers, returning with random objects, glow sticks, a shoe, and at one point what looked like a small inflatable cactus. The chaos reached its peak when Ken, desperate for the loo, wandered into a tent that turned out to be the DJ booth. Moments later, the music cut out, replaced by Ken's gruff Yorkshire accent over the speakers. Where's the flaming toilet? The crowd cheered wildly, mistaking him for part of the act, and started chanting, Where's the flaming toilet? Where's the flaming toilet? By midnight, the gang had rejoined the coach. Lecherous Lee stumbled back with a wide grin and pupils that were like saucers. He was covered in day-glow body paint. Sandra was cheerful and chilled after winning a glow stick dance-off. Vinny was trying to convince a group of ravers to come back to the Rampant Horse for proper drinks. Dave shook his head, surveying the chaos. Only us, eh? Only us. Scraps barked in agreement, a neon necklace dangling from his collar. Some tiny dog-sized dealy boppers hanging off his head. And as the coach rattled back towards the Longcroft, Ken swore to ditch the Sat Nav and threw it out the window. Vinny sang an off-key rendition of Wonderwall, and Sandra threatened to strangle Lecherous Lee if he put his hand on her thigh one more time. It wasn't the day at the seaside they planned, but for the crew of the Rampant Horse, it was just another tale to tell over pints and laughter the following night. Hope you enjoyed that. Bit of Dave and Vinny.